Let's go back in vintage history. Classic cinema TV. Wendy's Classic Corner. Wendy's Classic Corner.
Hello, welcome to Wendy's Classic Corner. I'm Wendy, and today we're going to be talking about film noir. Film noir was a term originated by the French in approximately 1946 to describe a certain kind of American crime film. Film noir loosely translates to dark film, which is often a reference to the black and white, gritty atmosphere in these films, and also possibly the seedy characters and the themes in the film. It's often debated whether film noir is a genre or a style. What's not as contested is that to be designated a film noir, the film must have a certain plot or stylistic elements and must fall within the time frame of 1940 to 1958. There are still noirs after this time frame, but they have their own category, one that we will discuss in the next show. Some characters you will commonly find in a film noir will include an anti-hero, usually the main character. This is usually a world-weary, embittered, and weak man who is easily led astray. Then you also have a femme fatale. The femme fatale is usually a morally corrupt and uses her feminine wiles to lead our anti-hero down the wrong path. You also have a crime, which is generally a murder. You have police or law enforcement pursuit, and then you also often have pursuit by thugs or bad guys. Not every film noir has these exact characteristics, but these things are common in most film noirs. Stylistic elements that you might find in film noir would include: most film noirs are in black and white, although there are occasional rare color film noirs. The black and white is often used to convey atmosphere and artistic elements. Many lighting elements in film noir derived from German expressionist films in the 1920s. In particular, you may see rain-soaked pavements, cigarette smoke or mist, light coming from street lights or neon signs, shadows, usually distorted and twice the size of a person. This is common in German expressionism. And you might also see shadows of vertical blinds across a guilty person to represent jail or a prison uniform. Now that we've had a quick introduction to film noir, I want to talk about a couple of my favorite film noirs. I'll start with a more typical film noir as far as the character elements go. Sam Fuller's Pickup on South Street, 1953. Though in all honesty, this film does not have the most prototypical film noir plot. We definitely have our anti-hero, definitely morally bankrupt, a pickpocket and grifter named Skip McCoy, played perfectly by Richard Widmark. Skip likes to pick people's pockets on the train. Skip inadvertently finds a gold mine when snatching a purse of our femme fatale Candy, played by Jean Peters. Candy is a gangster's mole who is delivering some microfilm, which, unbeknownst to her, contains classified government information and is being put in the hands of communists. Skip realizes how important his new prize is and is now being pursued by both the police and the gangsters. Candy is sent to try to seduce Skip and get back the film. However, she only succeeds in falling in love with Skip. There are some extremely steamy scenes between Skip and Candy, and the chemistry between the two actors is almost palpable. Thelma Ritter is also in this film as Mo, who is another type of grifter who sells Skip out to the police. Thelma was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for her role in this film, and you can't help but feel for her character, a street smart scam woman just trying to save up for a fancy tombstone. It is a heartbreaking role and really done to perfection. If you haven't seen this film, I highly recommend it. If you can't find it by streaming online, I want to remind everyone that you can check out your local library. They will most often have a DVD or Blu-ray. If it's not at your local library and you're in Allegheny County, you can search the entire library system and have the film sent to the library of your choice. You can also do an interlibrary loan, which gives you access to libraries across the United States. It might take a week or so to get the film, but it's free. The second film I want to discuss is a more stylistic film noir, and actually my favorite film. It's Carol Reed's The Third Man from 1949. I think it's important to note that Carol Reed directed this film, as it's a common misconception that this is an Orson Welles film. While Orson Welles is in the film, he was only involved as an actor. The characters and plots don't exactly follow the typical film noir pattern. The lead character isn't morally bankrupt. The leading lady is not really a true femme fatale. There is a crime, and there is a pursuit from both law enforcement and villains. But what really stands out in this film is the cinematography done by Robert Krasker and the stylistic elements. We have lots of wet pavements. We have shadows. And we have a camera technique called the Dutch angle, very common in German Expressionism, to give the viewers the perspective of uncertainty and confusion the character is experiencing. Our main character, Holly Martins, who is played by Joseph Cotton, is a writer of fiction novels. He comes to Vienna at the request of his friend Harry Lime, played by Orson Welles, to partner in some unknown endeavor Harry has cooked up. However, upon his arrival, he is told that Harry Lime is dead. Holly manages to get to the cemetery in time for the burial, and there he meets Major Calloway, played by Trevor Howard, who is investigating Harry Lime for criminal activities. He is also bewitched by our leading lady, Anna, played by Alida Valli, who he comes to find out was Harry Lime's girlfriend. Holly believes that Harry's death was no accident and is incensed that the police are not investigating his death. This film has a surprise plot twist, which is done very impactfully towards the middle of the film. Another interesting note about this film is the lack of a conventional soundtrack. Carol Reed chose instead to use zither music, played by a local Vienna musician. This really assists in the atmosphere of the film and adds a realism of a post-war Vienna. The Third Man was nominated for 3 Oscars. The only person who won an Oscar for this film was Robert Krasker for Best Cinematography, Black and White, which just highlights how beautifully artistic and stylistic the film really is. The other nominations were for Best Director and Best Editing. If you haven't seen The Third Man, I really encourage you to pick up a copy at the library or stream the film. You will be hard-pressed to find a more beautifully shot film, and in particular, the last scene of the film is so incredibly picturesque that it could be in an art museum. Hello? Oh, yep, sounds good. Send them in. Well, folks, we're going to hear what our viewers have to say about film noir. First up today, we have Louie. Hi, Louie. Welcome to Wendys Classic Corner. What film noir do you want to talk about today?
Hi, Wendy. Today I'm going to be talking about Howard Hawks' wickedly clever 1946 film, The Big Sleep. It prominently stands out in the film noir genre from its use of cynical heroes and overall cynicism, an intricate main and several subplots, dark lighting, design, and effects, and a deep undercurrent of existential philosophy. The Big Sleep takes place in America during the Great Depression of the 1930s. When it was released, it was a critical and commercial success that has inspired filmmakers from Akira Kurosawa to the Coen brothers. Screenplays adapted from the Raymond Chandler novel of the same name by a team that included American author William Faulkner. The plot starts simply. Private Detective Philip Marlowe, played by Humphrey Bogart, hired by aging retired General Sternwood to resolve the gambling debts of his reckless daughter Carmen, played by Martha Vickers. Sternwood's older, more reserved daughter Vivian, played by Lauren Bacall in her first starring film role at the age of 20, meets Marlowe and implies the case is far more complex than he's been told, since a ruthless casino owner and a mysterious disappeared family friend are also involved. From there, The Big Sleep moves at a complex and fast pace. People associated with the Sternwood family are murdered, and we see Marlowe pulled deeper and deeper into an intricate web of treachery and crime. In its craft and execution, Big Sleep parallels critically acclaimed TV series 24 with lead actor Kiefer Sutherland in a near identical role to the cynical, quick-witted Marlowe. with a fast-moving, multi-layered pace. America was in the throes of the Great Depression, and society was generally disillusioned and cynical about its prospects for the future. The acquisition of wealth is prominent in the film and the novel. It's coveted, enjoyed, and respected, and is the prime goal for the unrepentant seedy crime ring that thrives as a result. Many of the characters kill and bribe for money, and they employ a singular, cynical wit that allows them to deal with the economic and societal turmoil of this period in history. Marlowe is a stellar example of this wit that allows him to adapt to the, at first, mysterious and then worsening situation he faces. From his self-depreciating humor that he's not a good man, by kidding that he has a Valley Girl tattooed across his chest, mislabeling unlikable women as angel and sugar, Marlowe rises above the turmoil he finds himself in to quickly move forward and resolve his case. The film's plot is complex, with multiple murders, misdirection, ever-deepening character studies, and set changes. It could be impossible to follow without the use of a pen or pencil and notepad. Imagine what it was like to see it in theaters back then without the use of the venerable pause button on our remotes. The sets, by art director Carl Jules Wild and set director Fred McLean, range from the luxuriously opulent, intricate, brightly lit Sternwood mansion and a casino that is a crime ring front, seedy, shadowy, dim-lit alleyways and poorer neighborhoods. The ever-switching use of hard and soft lighting for both close-up and medium shots with the use of fog toward the end of the film by photographer-director Sidney Hickox remarkably tell the opposition of these two facets of American society at the time, and not just invite, but pull the moviegoer directly into the action and what each character experiences. One of the essential elements in film noir are flashback sequences that help orient the moviegoer into the plot. Now, while these are absent in The Big Sleep, all the elements of the film, from screenplay, acting, lighting, and set design, neatly accomplish effective flashback sequences without ever being present or needed. The Big Sleep remains as one of the quintessential examples of film noir that is easily relatable to modern times. We are first invited, then rapidly and unnervingly pulled in to witness the process of a criminal investigation. The moviegoer's mind must race to keep up with Marlowe. Instead of just watching the detective, you become a detective yourself, and we're not allowed to neatly glean the investigation's results without tremendous thought and effort. It's sometimes unconventional and unapologetic, but always pleases and has rightfully earned its place in film history.
Thanks, Louie. And our next viewer will be Deanne. Hi, Deanne. Welcome to Wendy's Classic Corner. Tell us about your favorite film noir.
Hi, Wendy. My favorite noir is Double Indemnity from 1944, and this was released fairly early on in the film noir cycle of the 40s and 50s. And I think it's the perfect example of a film noir, both as a style of film and also in the content of the film that noirs usually deal with. You get high contrast lighting, which has pitch darkness pitted against piercing light. You have shadows and fogs, a whole spectrum of grays. The Venetian blinds that Wendy mentioned earlier cast shadows on the wall, always slanting on the walls, and sometimes cutting again across the characters' faces, like Wendy mentioned, almost like prison bars. And the plot is about as bleak as movies got in the golden era of Hollywood. The focus here is not on a noble hero fighting for a victory, but it's on seemingly average people who are plotting crimes like murder and fraud. And everything is complicated in noir, and instead of a hero and villain, in this movie we have a triangle of characters, and they do line up with the types of characters that Wendy mentioned in the intro. You have Fred McMurray, who is playing the man who's sort of led astray. Barbara Stanwyck is the femme fatale in this film. And then you have Edward G. Robinson, who this film doesn't necessarily have a police figure, but he is an investigator for the insurance company, because we're dealing with fraud, insurance fraud in this film, and he kind of functions in that role. And this movie, it announces a new era in film, and it presents us with a world that's trying to cope with the aftermath of World War II. Now, why Double Indemnity is my favorite noir is because I think it's kind of your perfect starter noir. This is the one to see if you've never seen one before and you want a good introduction. It has just about every trope or preoccupation that you're going to see in all of these films. And I was lucky enough to see it before I saw a lot of other key noirs, and it gave me a really good context that helps me to enjoy, when I watch some of the lesser accessible and less successful noirs. And the writing in this film is amazing. You have Billy Wilder, who is the director of the film, and he co-adapted with Raymond Chandler, who Louie mentioned The Big Sleep. Raymond Chandler was a novelist who wrote The Big Sleep. Well, he also co-adapted this with Billy Wilder from a James N. Cain novel. And James N. Cain was the author of Mildred Pierce and The Postman Always Rings Twice, which were two films that were later adapted into two more key noirs. And everybody in this movie is smart, they're articulate, they're darkly funny, and the screenplay was adapted for Best Adapted Screenplay. It lost to Going My Way, also lost Best Picture to Going My Way, which was it was a Bing Crosby movie. It was more upbeat movie, maybe what people responded to more readily in those times. And I also like Double Indemnity because of the performances, particularly McMurray, Stanwyck, and Robinson. I came to this movie knowing Fred McMurray primarily through his comedic roles, for example, The Absent Professor, the film, and TV's My Three Sons. And so I was absolutely stunned to see him play such a dark, conflicted character and to pull it off so brilliantly. And Stanwyck, I had seen her play strong female characters, strong-willed characters, tough characters, but never quite this dark and this villainous. And so I was amazed by that as well. And Edgar G. Robinson, I think, is his most likable here. He often plays villains and in other films, and so it's interesting and nice to see him play somebody who's not committing a crime. He's the investigator. So I would say definitely see Double Indemnity. It's an amazing film, and I think you'll enjoy it.
I agree with you, Deanne. I think that Double Indemnity is the prototypical film noir. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. But lastly, last but not least, we have Kirk. Kirk, what film noir would you like to share with us today?
Hi, Wendy. The movie I chose to talk about today is Stanley Kubrick's The Killing from 1956. And the reason I picked this is because I think this is an all-time great heist film. And I think heist is a subgenre that really lends itself well to film noir. This movie clocks in at a tight 85 minutes. It is laser focused on the caper and the ensuing fallout. It's very cynical, and it's unforgiving both to its characters and to its audience. The plot revolves around a racetrack robbery. It's masterminded by a guy named Johnny Clay, played by Sterling Hayden. What's unique about Clay's gang is that he is the only career criminal among the group. The rest of these are just regular guys who, for one reason or another, are in desperate need of cash. And as Clay puts it, one of my favorite lines in the movie, they all have a little larceny in them. The fact that most of the crew is above suspicion, coupled with his own meticulous planning, leads Clay to believe that the plan is pretty airtight. It's going to go off without a hitch. But the more confident everybody gets, the more you start to suspect things are going to be so smooth. I want to talk about the cast, of course, starting with Sterling Hayden, who is probably more well known for playing villainous authority figures in movies like Dr. Strangelove and The Godfather. But here, early on in his career, he played a perfect anti-hero in films like this and also in The Asphalt Jungle. What I like about Sterling Hayden is he doesn't have that traditional leading man look, especially for the time. What he does have is just this great physical presence. He has a voice. He has a real charisma where even though you might not like the character you're playing, you're definitely on board for what he's doing, and you want to see what he's going to do next. You can fully understand why the rest of the gang is following his lead and going along with whatever he says. My favorite thing about the rest of the cast, and what I think it's important to talk about when you talk about film noir, is the look, and not just the cinematography or the way the film itself looks, but the characters. And the characters in this, the entire crew, they all look like they just walked off of a Dick Tracy comic strip. And I don't mean that they're like they look strange or ugly. They just have that real hard-boiled look to them. They got the noses, they got the chins, the foreheads, the ears. They got that real distinctive look that just kind of defines this genre. It personifies this genre. My favorite in the group is Timothy Carey, and a lot of people recognize him from Kubrick's next movie, which is Path of Glory. He has a much bigger part in that. But Carey does this great thing. He has this big toothy grin, and he talks through his teeth the whole time, but he doesn't move his lips. He can still enunciate everything he says while he's talking like that. It's fantastic, and it's almost inhuman. And not that he looks monstrous or ugly, but just a person shouldn't be able to do what he's doing, and he does it. And it just it kind of throws you off, but still sucks you in. The character he's playing is this psychopath, so that grin just tells you everything you need to know about him. And that's just one of many examples in this movie of the physicality supplementing the performance of the actor. As I mentioned, the story in this movie is focused entirely on the heist. We don't get a lot of subplot. We just get enough information as to why each of these characters is involved in the caper. One guy has a sick wife he has to take care of. Somebody else is in debt to his bookie and is desperate, and things like that. Me personally, exposition is one of my biggest pet peeves in movies. So I love when a film gives you bare bones information and just forces you to keep up. The movie is also told in a non-linear fashion, which keeps you guessing even more. What happens is you're watching each character plan and strategize and plot out their own individual part of the heist, but you don't see how it all comes together to the very end when they're actually pulling it off. And it's like a puzzle, and you're getting one piece at a time. Kubrick actually had to fight the studio to tell the story that way. They wanted a more traditional narrative, and what he finally did was he cut it as a straightforward narrative. The movie didn't work at all, so he kind of won that battle. And Quentin Tarantino has also cited the structure of this story as a big influence on his movie Reservoir Dogs. Before I finish, I want to touch briefly on the ending of this movie, and I'm not going to ruin it, but it is a Hays Code era crime film, so you probably guessed by now that things don't exactly go as planned. I will say also that it probably, in the same time, doesn't end the way you think. This movie uses violence very sparingly and very smartly, and not very often. So the tempo of this movie the ending doesn't necessarily have the tempo that you might think. And the main reason I bring up the ending is because even if nothing I said has interested you, this movie doesn't sound like it's up your alley at all. It is definitely worth watching, if for no other reason, the very ending where Sterling Hayden gives maybe the all-time greatest line reading to close things out. I'm very tempted to quote it, but I won't, because A, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, and B, I won't do it justice. But anybody who's seen the movie knows exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen it, I hope you check it out.
Wow, now I think everybody's dying to know what that great ending line is. So thank you very much, Kurt, for that. And I think we have a couple minutes to just chit-chat with our guests. I wanted to say I thought it was really funny that of the four of us together, when I suggested we pick a film noir, that 3 of the 4 of us tried to pick Double Indemnity to talk about. So I think that just really showcases like what a just very typical film noir, like just has all the exact components of a film noir. We have only a couple minutes left, but does anybody want to say any parting comments? Like, I really want to thank you guys for helping me and joining me today. Does anybody have something real quick they want to say?
I'll say this about Double Indemnity. What I love about that movie is how modern it is. Like, that movie could have been made in 2015 and you wouldn't have to change anything. First time I watched it, I'm like, oh, Fred MacMurray's going to get suckered into this slowly. And it's like, no, you turn the movie on, 5 minutes in, he's ready to do murder. And I just love that about that film so much.
I-
That's a lot of Billy Wilder, though.
I really love the dialogue in that, all the double entendres that they have in that. It's just, there's a point when he first comes to her house when they're just talking and everything is just double entendre, and I just think it's just such smart writing. I love it so much. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. I really enjoyed discussing film noir with you, and I hope our viewers have enjoyed the show. Please make sure to join us next time when we discuss other kinds of noirs, such as neo-noirs, foreign noirs, and western noirs. And remember, if you want to be a guest on the show, you simply have to follow Wendy's Classic Corner on Facebook or email me at wendysclassiccorner@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Wendy from Wendy's Classic Corner saying so long, and here's looking at you, kid.
Why go anywhere else for classic movies?